Well, welcome to another quarantine episode of Operating System. In this week, we're going to be talking a lot about security and how you're going to protect up your system on a given network or on the internet. So we're going to be talking a lot about some of the things that just have happened, I guess, over the past 20, 30 years, some of the different things that may go wrong on any given system. So yeah, let's start out with the virus. Everybody knows this one. This is the general term used for absolutely everything that might possibly go wrong with your computer. If your computer is slow, it's a virus. If your computer rebooted, it's a virus. If your computer is acting up, it's a virus. If your computer this, if your computer that, it's a virus, it's a virus, it's a virus. I don't know how many times working at Circuit City, doing this whole PC repair thing for years, how many times every single thing was a virus and it wasn't a virus at all. A lot of times it was just, they downloaded way too much junk on their computer, so their hard drive was full, so they had to defrag the thing, but they never did. So that was a virus. But, a virus really does have an actual definition, and it's never really that. It's never what a lot of people were coming in complaining of. So, virus. Any software that replicates itself onto other areas of the computer's memory. So basically, this is a piece of software that refuses to be deleted, and then it just does random things. It could do anything, really. It can just run a stress test to make you mad because everything is running slow. It could fill up all of your memory so that it starts writing to your disk. It can start deleting files. Anything, absolutely anything can fall under the umbrella of a virus, which is why the newer terms that we're going to be talking about, or the other terms, they are kind of under this, a lot of them are going to be underneath the virus umbrella. So much so that we tried to create a better umbrella word for it. So because some of the earlier malicious software were called viruses, everything just kind of became a virus, colloquially, right? Like not technically, that's not what you're actually supposed to be calling them. So the umbrella word that we came up with is malware. So you could say a virus is malware, a worm is malware, a Trojan is malware, spyware is malware, adware is malware, backdoors are malware. Let me see, cookies, you can make a argument, I guess. I guess that's about it. Password crackers, exploits, keyloggers, those are all malware. So if there's anything that's on your computer that's making it run poorly, not just poor optimization, right? Like not because you have too many files or whatever. If it is an actual malicious piece of software, it is malware. So mal being the root of malicious, and ware being the suffix of like software, right? So bad software. That's what malware really is. And virus now falls underneath that that heading. So a virus usually stays contained. That's the difference. So a virus and a worm are going to be very, very similar in what they do, but a virus usually stays contained within one machine, and a worm will try to replicate itself over the network. So if you have poorly configured firewalls or something like that, and you have 10 Windows computers at your home, and you got a worm, well, there's a good chance that worm's going to make it onto all 10 of those computers. So that's its whole entire premise, is that worms, just like they do underground, right? They burrow through and find their way from one place to another. That's what a worm does. So Trojan, similar to a worm in that it propagates over a network, but not by itself. It's usually malware that attaches itself to like an email, whether knowing or unknowing, right? You may be someone that is actually putting the Trojan in the email, or you may be someone that doesn't know that there's a Trojan packed into the email and you forward it on to somebody else, right? So Trojan, just like the Trojan horse, you gift a cool wooden monument to someone in the shape of a horse, but inside of that horse is actually a strike force of people that are going to do not so good things to you when you actually bring the horse in to your city walls. So that's the same thing, right? Like you get this email, and it says, hey, it's a UPS tracking code. or something like that. So double click on this PDF to get that. And then you double click on that PDF, and it turns out that PDF wasn't a PDF after all, or it was, but it had malicious intent. So it ran some kind of script when you opened it up. And long story short, you are now infected with something. And that something can be anything, right? Any kind of thing that requires that you run it. So that a lot of times that's going to take the form of crypto lockers. So ransomware, I guess, is what you would really call that. And ransomware just being that software that encrypts all your stuff and then shakes you down for the key. So, give me 1 Bitcoin and I'll give you the key. That's kind of the deal with that. Spyware. Spyware is software that will try and track you, really. And spyware has, I guess, enjoyed a huge propagation recently, but over the past 10 years, we have, I guess the word is to become accustomed to it. And it may be becoming accustomed to it because you don't understand that it's happening, but those that it is happening to usually brush it off and say, oh, well, I don't have anything to hide anyway, so, whatever. And that's a really, in my opinion, that is a really not good argument, right? I mean, everybody has something to hide. Everybody has something to hide. If you don't have anything to hide, then you can send me your bank credentials right now, right? Everybody has something to hide. So spyware is malicious whether or not you think it is or not. So spyware is software that will relay confidential information to an attacker. But these terms have become really, really muddy. So an attacker may not actually be someone in a hoodie that's trying to steal your information. It could very well be a website like Facebook that follows you around everywhere you go, tracking every single click that you make, everything that you look at, how far you scroll down on a page, and they put that in kind of a profile for you. But the thing about this profile, though, is it's not attached to any specific username unless you're signed into Facebook. In that case, it is. But if you're not signed into Facebook, then it goes by your browser ID. And how often do you uninstall your browser? Right? So this browser ID is just as good as a username. And any website that has anything to do with Facebook, right? Does it have a Facebook little thumbs up button? Does it link you to Facebook? Does it have any call out to Facebook whatsoever? If it does, then Facebook can track you on that website. And if you're talking about really popular websites, who doesn't have that little Facebook click button that says, find us on Facebook and like our posts and blah, 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 right? So spyware is the software that will track you, but the things that we had identified as being spyware when we coined the term 10, 15 years ago are now being done, but in a way that has become acceptable in general usage. So you could argue that lots of things are spyware that are not technically falling under that thing because, people want the Facebook service, right? But do they know that they're being tracked to every single website ever? So I think knowledge is key on that one. And if everybody knew, there might be more hullabaloo about it. But as of right now, we are where we are. So adware. Now, adware is not necessarily a dangerous thing, but since most people don't want, unsolicited ads on their website or on their desktop, adware is considered bad. So adware is basically just a piece of software that will show you ads randomly. This was really big in the late 90s, early 2000s on Windows, where you would install free internet, like free dial-up or something like that, and then there would be ads scrolling on your screen all day long. But after you uninstalled it, it still left the ad software, so that would be considered adware, where it would just, every now and then, a browser window pops up and it's like, hey, buy this thing. And you're like, but I don't want that thing. So the Richard Stallman thing, I think, comes a lot from this idea that Ubuntu had a partnership with Amazon for a little while. And there was basically a link. You click that link, and Amazon knew you were coming from Ubuntu. So that right there is what triggered him. But Richard Stallman has way more beef with Ubuntu than just the spyware thing. So now As far as I know, it's just a shortcut now. It's not actually an application that knows anything about you at all. That was a misstep by Ubuntu, especially when you're operating in this whole free software, security kind of situation with where the way that Ubuntu was. That was a pretty bad misstep. I don't know how they didn't catch that one, but now they're in the situation now. I think Richard Stallman really just has beef with the fact that they bundle like codecs and third-party software and software that requires licensing and things like that. That's really where Richard Stallman has his beef now. So, yeah, there are only 48, I think, give or take, pieces of hardware that get the Richard Stallman stamp of approval. And as far as I know, you cannot build a laptop. There isn't a laptop that has the full-on stamp of approval outside of there's this group called Purism that they make hardware specifically for that reason. Not for Stallman, but for the full-on, you can see everything about it, you know everything about it. If you're curious about it, here's the schematics, here's the blueprints, here is the software, here's the firmware, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Stallman is as hardline as you get when it comes to freedom. But we need a guy like that. For as crazy and as many skeletons in that guy's closet that he has, we need a guy like that. So when Richard Stallman isn't around anymore, I hope someone picks up the torch because we need someone reminding us that, hey, this stuff's not free. This stuff's not free. Yeah, keep in mind. And now, that's kind of where I sit on that whole Facebook thing earlier. So, yeah, I got a little Stallman in me, I guess. Anyway, denial of service, a DOS, not a DDoS, just a regular old DOS, is anything that would prevent you from getting your job done, I guess. So if I came to the back of your PC and I unplugged it, yeah, denial of service. That's anything. Anything falls under that. Distributed denial of service, however, that is slightly different. If you've ever been on a video game dominating and someone went to a Russian website, paid $5 and gave them your IP address, well then, you might have been kicked off of that server or out of that game or something like that. What ends up happening? You pay your $5 and that group will leverage, and I think I have botnet on here. Maybe not. Well, maybe not. Well, botnet is basically just a collection of hardware or nodes, computers around the internet that have been conscripted for a specific use. So a lot of times this is if you leave your Ring doorbell facing out to the internet and you don't know how to configure it, you don't know how to secure it up or anything like that, you just put it out there and you just, all right, cool, there it is, yay, I can get it on my phone, hooray. There are a lot of times where there are exploits on those pieces of hardware that you are able to leverage as a hacker, and you take them over, make them do what you want. And a lot of times what you want is to knock other things off the internet or to do low-power malicious things. And a lot of times they just get added to a botnet, and you basically point your laser at a specific entity, that being an IP address or something like that. And then everybody does this DNS reflection or TCP half open attack. And basically those are just you reflection amplification. Basically you spraying a bunch of dummy data essentially at an IP address, and that IP address will typically pay attention to it and then get overwhelmed by it and then just stop. So a lot of times with that, you're doing this DNS amplification attack where basically you just this is kind of complex. We end up talking about this in security, and then for you guys, I think that's going to be in fourth semester. So it is a bit of a complex topic, but basically what you're doing is a DNS query is a very small thing. It's like 50 bytes, but the DNS answer is like 200 bytes. So there is a factor of 4 size difference between the query and the answer. So what ends up happening is you send a DNS query to DNS servers, and DNS servers have like big fat pipes, right? You're talking about the public DNS servers like Google and Cloudflare and all these others. They have protection against this now, but this was really, really popular, especially for third-party DNS, especially ISPs that run their own DNS but may not have the security up to snuff. You'll send this DNS query, but you'll spoof the source IP address, right? It is you, but then you say the source IP address is not actually my IP address. It's this guy's IP address. So this would be the guy that you want to knock off the internet. You'll put his IP address in the packet instead. And so the DNS server will receive your 50-byte query and then answer with a 200-byte query to a totally different IP address. And that will, you're basically saying, if I can dump out 40 megabits per second out of my connection, that means that, what is 40 times 4? You're getting 40, 12, 60, 160 megabits that you're actually getting. You own 40, but you can turn your 40 outbound into 160 and then point that at somebody. So you can say that if that guy can only download at 100 megabits per second, well, I can saturate his entire pipe. I have 60 megabits of play here, and I can just stop him from being on the internet. And I just need to be able to stop him for 30 seconds at a time, right? That's long enough for him to time out off the server, kick him out. So, yeah, I pay $5. Someone leverages their botnet where you've got 100 devices that all have 10 meg up. So that's 1 gigabit. And then you can amplify that by 4. That's 4 gigabits. That'll knock anybody off the internet, right? That's 100 devices. So imagine when you have 1,000 or 10,000, right? Some of these botnets like Mirai have well over 500,000. So there ain't nothing that's going to be able to stay on the internet against something like that. And we can't take down Mirai. So good luck out there if you're getting knocked off the internet. If you generate the ire of somebody with $5 extra and knowledge of shady Russian websites, good luck. You're not staying on the internet for very long. So anyway, not if you're paying $40 for it. And on top of that, your ISPs are typically looking out for this kind of thing, so their firewalls may catch it. But, assuming that you make changes to the way that your botnet acts, then even intrusion prevention services won't stop that. And you're paying thousands of dollars a year for something like that. If it's new, all you got to do is change it up a little bit. Then you can fool multi-thousand or multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars of software into allowing that type of traffic. It's up to the human behind that to get a notification and to actually deal with that. So, actually in Linux this week, we're actually talking about how to forward traffic from a specific IP address to the loopback. But that's not going to stop this. Because a lot of times if you're talking Mirai botnet, you're talking 1,000 different nodes. How are you going to do that to 1,000 different IP addresses as a human? Right? You got to type in 1,000 different IP addresses, or write a script to cycle through all the IP addresses that you get, and then God forbid they stop with that 1,000 and go on to a new 1,000. So the IP addresses are all different. You do that every 10 minutes, and then there's nobody in the world that'll be able to deal with you. So that's the whole premise of Cloudflare. When you're talking about not single devices, but you're talking about like at home, you're talking single devices on the internet like a web server. Cloudflare deals with that. But Cloudflare is not perfect either. So you run into situations where Cloudflare can't even help you, and they are the number one guy. They are it. They are the only company in this world that can reliably keep your website online, and even they fail from time to time. Right? They're not 100%, but they don't have to be. If you're 95%, people will pay you tons and tons of money. So anyway, backdoors. This is usually what happens with when you install a Trojan. You get a backdoor added to your system so that someone can follow that up and log into your computer. Now, backdoors can be a bunch of different things, right? But typically they are like a command line prompt someone can get once your computer has installed whatever Trojan or whatever backdoor. Or They can install screen watching software, or even they can install a remote access tool to be able to control your computer while you're away. So either way, the command line one is probably the easiest way to get away with, the easiest one to get away with. But there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. So backdoor is just this general idea that you can install stuff onto people's computers once you get them to double click on that PDF that said there was a UPS tracking number or something like that on it. Spam. You can't get away with a security conversation. Yeah, Eternal Blue is one of those where not technically a backdoor, it's just a straight up exploit. Eternal Blue is pretty bad, especially if you don't update your machine, which is why Windows is basically forcing updates on everybody now. You get Eternal Blue, and you got to put your foot down sometime. Eternal Blue affected every single version of Windows in existence and all versions of Windows prior that are not even getting updates anymore. I mean, this affected everything from Windows 95 to Windows 10. Eternal Blue did, and it gave you full access. Full 100% everything access to your computer. So yeah, the only way Windows could fix that is through updates, and the only way Windows could get you to install it is to force you. Because there are tons of people running Windows 7 that are still running Windows 7, that were running Windows 7 at the time of Eternal Blue, that would just ignore updates. And crazy people put Windows 7 and its brother Windows 2008 and R2 straight up on the internet. And they were just getting knocked over by Eternal Blue over and over and over again. And there's another one. There's a remote desktop protocol one that's out there right now. I can't remember the name of it. But you expose remote desktop protocol, the thing that allows you to control a Windows computer from a remote location with a full GUI, right? You expose that to the internet, you're done. You're absolutely done. There's no coming back from that. Absolutely no coming back from that. So yeah, VPN, folks. VPN into your network and then do remote desktop protocol. Please do not expose your Windows computer directly to the internet. If that is not a testament to the way that Windows deals with security, I don't know what is, right? The two ways, Windows sharing and Windows remote desktop protocol, the two ways that you are typically accessing a Windows computer are so full of holes that you put them on the internet, you give it an hour and you're already done. You are done. You are already on, what is the name of that website? I'm drawing a blank. Shodan. You are just immediately added to Shodan the moment you get on the internet. It is crazy. It is crazy the amount of holes that Windows has. But, they've been around for years and years and years, and you figure some of these things might be looked at already, but they are not. So, fun times. So spam. You can't get away talking about a security conversation without talking about spam, but it's a short conversation. Spam is basically that email that you don't want, right? Someone gets your email address from a sign-up sheet that you made 3 years ago or something like that. They sold it off to some company, and now this company is trying to sell you something, whatever that something might be. So spam is not necessarily bad in and of itself, other than the fact that it's annoying. What is bad is phishing. Now, phishing is basically spam with malicious intent. So phishing is an email, usually a mass email that is sent to you, and it says something, that UPS thing, right? Like they sent that same email to 1,000 other people, and it basically says, you have a UPS something tracking number, and you got something coming tomorrow. Here, click on this to check it, whatever. That phishing email contains the Trojan that contains the backdoor that when you double click it will give someone access to your computer, right? It all goes in order like this. So phishing, that's the scary thing about a lot of this spam stuff. So spam in and of itself is not necessarily bad. It's when it turns into phishing emails that it becomes bad. And then there are additional attacks called spear phishing that will make this even worse, because a phishing email you can probably spot, right? You can take a look at that and you're like, I don't have any UPS deliveries pending or anything like that, so I shouldn't be getting an email like this, so ignore. Spear phishing is a whole lot harder to track because it says it came from your boss, right? Any type of publicly accessible information can be added to a spear phishing email and fool you. right? All you have to do is misconfigure your Facebook friend status, where you let everybody see your friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends of friends or whatever, and then they can put together this whole entire web of you and all the people that you know. And if they can see your posts, they can see who you trust, and they can then craft an email from that person, right? And it could even come from an email address that you know that they have, that your friend has. So it can come from my.friend@gmail.com. You can spoof that. And at that point, it's like, hey man, could you click on this thing and shoot me like $5 or something like that, right? You click on that link and now you're infected with something. And, from a work standpoint, this is really where it's at. From a work standpoint, at least, me, my email address is publicly accessible. And so is my boss's email. And so is his boss's email. And so is his boss's email. And so is the chancellor of this college. All of those emails are accessible. All you got to do is just, open up the webpage, copy, paste it. Easy peasy. And then you can craft an email from that address to all of, me and all of my coworkers that says, hey, we have this meeting, click on this WebEx link. And that WebEx link was actually not a WebEx link at all, right? And, especially right now, we're getting a large number of email addresses because of the way that we're working right now. So, spam, not necessarily bad, just annoying. Phishing gets a little malicious because it's umbrella targeting a lot of people. Spear phishing, though, is very focused. And if you're getting spear phished, they really want you bad. Because usually it takes human interaction to do spear phishing. Phishing can be done automatically. A cookie. So this is part of that thing I was talking about with this whole Facebook tracking deal, where you have this one session and a cookie is basically information stored within your browser or within your file system that links to your browser that basically has an identity on you. So it'll put your Facebook ID on it or something like that. That way, the Facebook button can check that cookie and see who you are and then start adding that back to your profile. So cookie is just additional information about you or your machine. IP address spoofing, this is what I was talking about with that whole DNS amplification attack. You spoof the source IP address to the DNS server. That way it sends it to somebody else instead of you. So you're basically you're manipulating the packet before it leaves your machine to have a different IP address on it. A replay attack. This happens a lot in Wi-Fi. Basically, when you log onto a Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, someone can copy those exact packets when you logged on and then send those same packets, in order again to the access point. And the access point's basically going to see this as, hey man, wait a minute. I've already seen these. You are doing something fishy, and it will just knock everybody off of Wi-Fi that had anything to do with that replay. Which means that it'll knock you, the legitimate user, off of Wi-Fi. And this is called deauthentication. And what happens with this is you will try to log back on again, right? I mean, Windows will do it for you. And once you do this, someone will capture those packets again and then do the replay attack again and deauth you again, and you'll connect again. And when you do this enough, you can actually plug all these back in together and start figuring out what the password was. Because you can start chipping away at the uniqueness of the encryption. So anyway, the replay attack is basically the first few steps of trying to crack WPA2. Man in the middle is basically an attack where someone is in the middle between you and the thing that you're trying to connect up to. So that might be your DNS server, it might be your DHCP server, it might be your web server, it might be whatever. There's a guy in the middle intercepting your packets, and a lot of times he's trying to manipulate those packets on the line. And the thing about this, a lot of times, is that you have no idea that it's happening. If you can do this with DNS, you basically own anybody. Anybody can be fooled into doing absolutely anything when you own DNS. Because DNS is the naming thing, right? You go to Facebook.com, you think you're going to Facebook.com, right? And who do you trust to make sure that you're getting to Facebook.com? Your DNS server. So if you control your DNS server, the thing about that, though, is that who looks? Look up at the top of this browser. How do you even know? Are you using HTTP or HTTPS? How do you know? How does grandma know? How does your sister that has no idea how the internet works know? So I agree with you. Don't use HTTP. But that doesn't mean anything to anybody that doesn't know how the internet works. Ask grandma what the difference between HTTP and HTTPS is, and she will look at you like a deer in headlights. So you can then say, well, don't use HTTP, you use HTTPS, and all you got to do is just make sure that there's a padlock on the website, right? Clink. Connection is secure. Well, what does that mean? How do you actually convince someone that it is actually secure? How do you know that it's secure? How do you go further than that? Well, you look at the certificate. Well, how do you know that that's right? How can you verify that? Who is GTSCA 101? Who's GlobalSign? So I agree with you. Never use HTTPS, at least for nothing that you would be authenticating over. But that requires a lot of knowledge as to what HTTP and HTTPS is, what a certificate is, what a certificate authority is, what trust is, what a three-way handshake is, all kinds of things. So this is really why I dislike this idea that Google just gets rid of it. They don't even show you anymore. You have to go in and actually click it to see HTTPS. Yeah, but I think that's the total point with all of this, is that you have good advice, but I don't think there's anybody in this world right now outside of people that work in IT or want to get into IT that have any idea how to use that advice. And that is a shame, because that advice used to be more accessible than it is now, because Google hides this HTTPS from you. So saying, look for the HTTPS and you'll be good, doesn't really hold water anymore, because now you're asking people to spend 5 seconds of their time clicking on the title bar to make sure that they're seeing HTTP or HTTPS. And is anybody going to do that every single time they go to a website that they log into? You would hope so, but I don't think they will, because even I don't. And yeah, I just hope I don't typo, to be honest with you. So that's just one of those things. But I think you really gotta wear that tinfoil hat if you're gonna be doing that quite often. So it is a deep discussion, and one that I think no one likes to have, because no one likes to deal with security in general, because they just want stuff to work. Yep, usability and security, two opposite ends of the spectrum, and you got to decide where you're going to land. And Google decided to land on the usability side rather than the security side. They wanted the thing up top, docs.google.com, to look pretty, as opposed to let you know whether or not it's secure. They just give you a little padlock. What does that padlock even mean? Because it means a lot of things. It doesn't mean one thing. So anyway, someone in the middle, stealing your datas, or if you're unencrypted, or manipulating your data, and even HTTPS can be siphoned off if you own DNS. So man in the middle, guy in the middle. Social engineering, this is me convincing you that you want to do something and I don't have authorization for it, right? So if I walk into a building and convince someone that I'm with the IT group, but I'm not, right? You walk in with a clipboard and a tie, and you're looking important, and you talk to someone at the front or whatever. It's can you just let me back really quickly? This is a security audit. You're not supposed to be letting the IT group know about this. This is a surprise visit, and this is to make sure that we are, PCI DSS compliant. You could say something like that, and as long as you're convincing someone to be like, oh yeah, okay, sure, yeah, come on back in, have a look. This happens a lot. So this happens a lot with red teaming, penetration testing. Social engineering can also be part of that whole thing. So vulnerability scanner. This is software that I guess a bad guy could use, but typically is used by the blue team, the other side, the defenders, the people that want to keep their network secure. This is a piece of software that will probe your network and tell you what's wrong. At least what's wrong in a general sense. It might give you some pointers like, hey, you probably don't want to have HTTP headers broadcasting out the version of your web server, because then that could be taken to a database and looked up and then find some exploits to that, and then that exploit could be leveraged against you, right? So it'll tell you a lot of different things, and it will tell you that Eternal Blue is available, right? It'll tell you the Remote Desktop Protocol exploit is available on that system, and it will remind you to go close that hole. Stop using SMBV1. Stop showing RDP out to the internet. Stop doing these things. Or patch your stuff so that these things don't actually happen, right? So vulnerability scanners are pretty fantastic. Exploit softwares, this is the other side of the vulnerability scanner. So once you figure out using a vulnerability scanner or just guessing, you can use something like Metasploit to say, you know what, I bet you this computer is infected, or not infected, but has the Eternal Blue exploit on it. I'm just going to give it a shot. Well, to be honest with you, if it's Windows 7, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to be right. So if you ever see a Windows 7 machine on the internet, don't do it. Do not do it unless you actually own it. But you would be able to fire up Metasploit, choose the Eternal Blue exploit, point it at that machine, press the exploit button, and all of a sudden you have a command prompt on that machine. You create yourself a user, turn on RDP, force a reboot of that computer, and then just, remote in with a full GUI and do stuff, whatever you want. Because your user that you created is an admin. Password cracker. So, even if you were patched against that RDP thing, password crackers can still get you in. Because it turns out Windows doesn't enforce a password larger than 14 characters for most operating systems. So password cracker, while it wouldn't be quick or anything like that, it might take days, it might take months. But how many of us groan whenever we have to change our password, right? I'm not going to do it. I don't want to. Nah, not this time. Right? So we can just run this password cracker for a couple of months, and what are the odds I'm going to find the password that you use? And what are the odds that you leave the administrator account open and available to use RDP? If you're not going in and actually explicitly denying that, then, well, it's on. So, yeah, assuming you have good security practice, you've turned it off, but if not, you can just use the administrator account and run password cracker against it, and if you don't have any kind of intrusion detection service telling you that, hey, there's a guy that's been trying to log into this thing from this IP address for days. So, yeah, if you don't have that, then, well, you're kind of up a creek, because eventually it's just going to work. For days it's been happening. So, anyway, password cracker. Basically, you give it a username or a list of usernames and a password or a list of passwords, and it just chews through it. Slowly but surely, it'll chew through it. And eventually, when the combination is correct, it'll tell you, hey, administrator with capital P @SSW0RD works on this machine. Go ahead and use it. So, yep, there you go. Well, if you don't have a password cracker, but you can get someone to click on a Trojan or click on a UPS PDF, right? The backdoor that you can install, or the software that you can install, is a keylogger. And now you won't have to do a password cracker. So if anybody actually logs onto that computer physically and then types in the password, bingo, your keylogger caught it. And then at the end of every day, your keylogger just emails you the text file that has all the things in it. And then you just do Control F for administrator, because what comes after administrator? The password. And you just find your password. Easy peasy. So, yeah. Anyway, these are the things that you're going to have to watch out for. But these are also the things that are the most notorious for people to just blindly click on because, well, why not? So you got to be careful. You absolutely have to be careful. And the worst thing that you can, the worst thing that you're going to encounter is not malicious software, is not hackers, is not whatever. It's going to be your users. Not because they are bad, but because they don't care. How do you get someone to care about computers when they hate computers? That is the task that you're going to be dealing with as general IT. So going back to the password crackers thing, why are GPUs used for this? Because password crackers, especially the local ones that you can just totally chew through, or the ones that are trying to break encryption, because encryption and doing simple things like password cracking is just basic arithmetic. There's really not a whole lot to it, which is why you can use the stream cores on these graphics cards. So graphics cards are really good at doing a few different things, and one of those things is basic math. So this is why you want to use graphics cards for like building blueprints and doing 3D design and all of that kind of thing, because it's all that's basic math as well. It's all vector graphics. So if all it needs to do is basic math, your video card is going to be, by a factor of 100 or 1,000 faster than a CPU. Even the fastest CPU, $600, 12-core, 16-core, 24-core CPU is not going to hold a candle to a 10-year-old NVIDIA graphics card with CUDA cores, right? Not even going to hold a candle. Like, they are 10 years apart, and that NVIDIA graphics card you can buy for $60, right? So the idea with that is that if it's basic math, if it's something simple, these graphics cards are able to do, 100 different things at a time and just chew through any simple thing. Now, a CPU is more expensive because it can do a gajillion different things really, really fast. Graphics cards tend to do a few different things really, really fast. So GPUs are used because most of the things that we're doing when we're password cracking or encryption cracking is just basic math. And graphics cards can do basic math really, really good. All right. So looking at how do we tell? How do we know? What do we do? So you've been telling me all these things and scare me out of my pants. I don't know what to do anymore. How do I deal with this? Well, a lot of times it's actually fairly simple. The one thing that you cannot get people to do is not click on random emails. You can train them, but someone with a spearfish is going to come by and fool somebody. Guarantee it. So it's not a matter of if you're going to get hacked. It's when. So you need to have security in place that will help you in that situation as well, right? Once we have a computer that is acting differently, you wall it off. You take it off the internet, you take it off the network, and you wall it off. And then someone's going to call you, I don't have internet anymore. And you're like, why? Look at this thing. Does it have a message in it? Yes. Okay, well, we need to take your computer now. You got to have that kind of thing in place. But that's a story for a different day. So what you can do now, even you there at home on your laptop or when you go to Starbucks, not right now because we're in quarantine, but when we are free to go back to Starbucks and go, be out on the public internet again and all that kind of thing, then these are the kinds of things that you want to do. Windows Defender. This is the old way. If you're still running Windows 8, it's what it looks like. This is basically the inbuilt Windows antivirus software. Listen, guys, if you are using McAfee or Norton or Trend Micro or Avast or Avira or Panda or ESET or any of these, any of them, you might be better served. Number one, you're going to be, you'll save $60 a year, but you might be better served just using Windows Defender. If you can come up with a good reason to use Avast or AVG or any of those others and not Windows Defender, then okay, fine, go for it. But if you can't, if the only reason you're using AVG is because it came pre-installed on your computer and you paid $60 for it because it just kept nagging you or whatever, just remove it. Eat the $30 that you have essentially thrown away. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But that's the deal. Windows Defender is going to do everything that all those other things do for free. Who better to know when Windows is misbehaving than Windows? There have been lawsuits after lawsuits after lawsuits about Windows and the way that they are hamstringing antivirus companies. The reason was that Windows did not want Windows to crash, right? Obviously, it's your operating system. You don't want it to be crashing. But the problem was that for antivirus to work, like Norton and McAfee, they need to have kernel hooks. Now, we've talked about the kernel just a little bit. The kernel is the heart of the operating system. It's the thing that lets the hardware talk to the software and vice versa. And, when you're playing a game, your kernel is intimately involved. Or you're doing anything, really. You open up Chrome, your kernel is involved, right? Chrome uses 3D support. So it can render things really fast and make things smooth and all that. And it's using your graphics card to do that. And it needs the kernel involved. Well, Norton and all of the other antiviruses need kernel hooks, meaning they modify the kernel. It is no longer 100% Windows code. And so once you have kernel hooks and something goes wrong, as in you get a blue screen and it reboots and you're like, here's the error code or whatever, and it says unknown this, unknown that, Windows has no idea what happened. You know what happened? You either A, have hardware issues like RAM is bad or something like that, which is more common, honestly, or you have software that has added kernel hooks and is failing somehow. Not to say that Windows Defender is working 100% of the time, just that if Windows Defender is the cause of your issue, well, then the error message is going to say Windows Defender took a dump on your operating system, right? But if it's Norton that does the same thing, then you're going to have no idea what happened. Absolutely no idea. So, long story short, those softwares modify Windows in a way that can break Windows. Windows has a rap for being really unstable, and I think a lot of times it's unfair. I will make those jokes. 99 times out of 100, I will make those jokes. But, I mean, a lot of times they don't deserve it. They don't deserve the amount of ire that we throw at them sometimes. They are a really good operating system. You know, as much as it pains me to say that because I'm a Linux guy. But still, it's a really good operating. It's been around for like 20, 30 years, man. Yeah, so my opinion on this, get rid of whatever third-party piece of trash you got. Just let Windows Defender take over. I'll show you how to check it. All right. So anyway, Windows Defender will scan usually weekly, something like that. It needs an update every single day because there's new stuff that comes out every single day. So you'll want to take a look at that. Make sure that you run your updates every day. Here's what it looks like in Windows 10. So in Windows 10, it's pretty easy to get to it. You just type in security, and it's this one, Windows Security. Come in here. It'll give you some things to work on or whatever. And right, virus and threat protection. This is the Windows Defender. On Windows 10, it comes pre-installed. So if you already have Norton or something like that, the moment you uninstall it, this one kicks back on. But here's the thing. Here's why you got to reboot after McAfee, after you uninstall it, because it's getting rid of those kernel hooks and it's running a different kernel, a modified kernel. So you have to reboot. So anyway, you know, you can, if you ever think that you have something wrong on your computer, you can do a quick scan. Any kind of threat will show up right here. This will tell you the last time that it was updated, which was luckily for me today. And ransomware protection. You've got to, the only thing that will protect you against ransomware is having backups. So it's not really ransomware protection, it's really just backing your stuff up. And so when you do get ransomware on your computer, you have a backup. That's really all that is. But then you've got account protection, so it'll sync all your account stuff. Firewall, we'll talk about more about this here in a little bit. App and browser control, this is how you can set up the different access to different softwares. We don't have to go too terribly far into any of this, but if you have questions on it, please ask. Yeah, Cronus is great for a backup, so long as you have it in cold storage, right? Like you do not have it connected to the computer. When you contract ransomware, you'll be good. Device performance, right? I mean, this is going to tell you whether or not you have smart issues or anything like that. So, if your battery is okay, if it is dying in terms of battery life, it needs to be replaced, things like that, right? And then, of course, parental controls if you want that. So we're going to stay here and here. Those are the two big ones. So, anyway, we've already kind of talked about this, right? Scan options, you can do specific things. Quick scan will just look into your users folders. Full scans will look into the entire Windows directory and everything else. You can do a custom scan if you want to scan specific things. And then you might want to do a Windows Defender offline scan. This is a scan where viruses and things can hide themselves while you are running the system. So if you do a Windows Defender offline scan, it will basically reboot your computer into safe mode and do the scan there before the virus is loaded up into memory, so it cannot hide itself or change its name or do kind of weird stuff, which is honestly, from a malware point of view, is really cool. Not really trying to cheerlead any malware software writers or anything like that, but I mean, it is pretty cool. So domain network, private network, public network, these are really just profiles. Domain and private networks will typically be a little more accepting of external connections, right? If you're on a private network, you're at home, which means that other Windows computers can probably share files with you and stuff like that, right? This is where Eternal Blue might come in handy because you are running SMB, Hopefully it's not SMBV1, so you are not exposed to Eternal Blue. Public network is basically just the gross. That is the gross profile, right? Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Don't touch me. I'm not going to say anything to you, even if you ask. That's that profile. That should be the profile that you're running on all the time, unless you have a good reason not to. If you do not have a good reason not to, choose public. Just choose public. That is the deal. So there are your virus and threat protection settings. You can turn on real-time protection, cloud-delivered protection, sample submission, and tamper protection. So real-time protection is it's basically scanning any new downloaded file that you get or any installed file. Cloud-delivered protection is basically you are talking to Windows servers to check out new threats that may not be downloaded to your computer yet, or that you don't have information about those threats downloaded to your computer yet. Automatic sample submission, if for some reason Windows Defender decides that this piece of software looks malicious, it will submit it to Microsoft so they can actually do some dissection on it, figure out what's going on. And then tamper protection is basically going to tell you whether or not any of these switches have been turned off without your permission. All right. So controlled folder access is basically you're saying that this folder cannot be tampered with. If something fishy happens with this folder, it's going to tell you. And then exclusions, you can set up a folder to do the opposite, right? Like you want it to have stuff in it. So like Windows Defender would say something about this thing that I'm downloading right now, but if it's being added to an exclusion or an excluded folder, it won't say anything about it. It assumes you know what you're doing. You told it to, so it's not gonna. So this is what it looks like in Windows 7 and 8. Obviously, Windows 7 is end of life now, so it's no longer supported, but it looks the same in Windows 8. And there's your real-time protection. Here's the one that is Windows 7 only. So Windows Defender had kind of a change back in the day. So if you ever encounter anybody running Windows 7 and it has Windows Defender on it and it looks like this, Windows Defender is actually not going to do anything. It's actually pretty trash back then. After it turned into Microsoft Security Essentials, which was like 2011 is when they first put it out. And you know, albeit it was really bad back then too, Security Essentials was. It turned into Windows Defender. Yeah, it was better than some of the options out there. But Windows Defender was pretty much just spyware. Things that were on your computer that were phoning home, sending information, things like that. It would let you know here. But that's all it really did. Now the firewall. Firewall is quite important. You have to have this thing. We were just talking about the profiles a second ago. And what you really want to pull out of this is you can allow individual applications through a firewall. You can go in and say, I have this video game that I like to play. It connects up to different servers on different ports, and I don't want to have to go through the firewall and manually say yes to this, yes to that, yes to this, yes to that. You can come in, change these settings, allow an app, find the app, go in, it's Call of Duty, COD.exe, double click on that, click open or whatever, and then you can allow it by checking it, and under which profiles, public or private. So if you're using public, you'll want to check that box under public. If you're using a private profile, check that box. The way that you know is it shows right there. Public network active, private network is not. So that's how you'll decide between the two. So that is app level firewalling. But a lot of times you're going to want to look through port level firewalling. This is what I'll have y'all do in the lab, or at least explain to me how to do in the lab. So Windows Defender firewall properties, you can see, you can turn off individual profiles if you'd like. You can temporarily change how they behave. But one of the things that you really want to do is the inbound rules. These are the important rules that you want to pay attention to. Anything with a check by it, the firewall is allowing. So you can do the app level thing, which in some cases can be a little more secure. Or you can just say, I've got 3 different FTP servers, and those FTP servers run on port 20 and 21. So you're going to want to come through and say, all right, I want to allow everything from port 20 and 21 inbound on my computer to be allowed. I don't care if it's FileZilla or if it's ProFTPD or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I just want them all to work. You can come in through, click on port, click next. The FTP is TCP, is a transmission control protocol, which means that every packet that you get, I need to make sure that it's right. So there, instead of that whole spray and pray kind of thing, just like I'll throw the packets at you, if you get them, right? TCP, you want them to get there, and then you'll say 2021, port 20 and port 21, and you want to allow it, and then which profiles you want it on, right? In my case, just public because it's the only one that's on, and then allow all FTP connections. You don't have to name it anything specific, but do make it description. What is the word? Like descriptive. There you go. And then right there, right? So now my machine is accepting anything on port 2021. To turn that off, you can just disable it. That'll turn it off. So I'm no longer listening to 20 and 21. And I can turn it back on. So this can just be one of those things that's like, all right, well, my FTP server's on. Let me go, turn on that firewall rule. That way it's on. And then once I'm done with it, I can turn it back off. Not quite, no. DMZ is putting it into a whole separate network that there is no firewall up against the internet. There might be a firewall between you and the DMZ. So like you're on the LAN, they're on the DMZ. There could be a firewall in between there. But typically, your DMZ is way more relaxed when it's talking to the internet. So unless you explicitly say otherwise, you put something in the DMZ and it can just be touched by anything on the internet. So you've got to be careful with the DMZ. A lot of times you'll expose only what you need on the DMZ. Sort of. I don't exactly know because they use UPnP, which is an absolute horrid protocol to be having on your network. I mean, UPnP can quite literally... By the way, UPnP is the whole reason why Mirai Botnet is so prevalent right now, because these webcams will go over and say, yeah, totally cool. Yeah, I'm on the internet directly now so that anybody can send text messages to me and, look at my camera and stuff like that. But yeah, that also means that bad guys can just, spoof your IP address and log into your camera and look at your video and stuff like that, right? I mean, do you want people looking at you? Especially if the cameras are inward facing. So Xbox is the same way. It leverages UPnP to open up ports on your router without your permission. I mean, you said yes to UPnP, so I guess you did allow it. But that's dangerous, which is another reason why these botnets can point their laser at you and knock you off the internet, right? Because your IP address is exposed. So anyway, long story short, UPnP, scary stuff. It's probably not the best idea to have it on in the first place, but if you want your Xbox to work, you kind of have to leave it on. But that does open you up to a whole lot of bad stuff. It's basically like putting your Xbox directly out on the internet. So in that way, yes. But man, yeah, don't. Don't. User account control. This is a really good way of kind of locking down your computer, especially if you have an administrator account and an account that is not an administrator. But this will remind you that you are doing something that is based on the system, right? So if you're going to go in, like it did right here, right? I go to advanced settings. This is user account control. It's reminding you, hey, you are touching Windows security stuff. Are you sure you want to do that? Except the downside to all of that is that nobody pays attention to what that does anymore. They just click yes. Because yes always makes it do whatever you want it to do, right? So you just click yes, you don't think about it. You just, yeah, sure, that's cool, sure. Whatever that is. I wanna edit the registry. Yes. I don't know what that's gonna do, but just yes. So be very careful. If UAC is popping up, then it's trying to remind you that things are happening that may affect the entire system. So keep that in mind. And to get to it, kind of skipped over that part. Just type in UAC, and then user account control pops up, and then you get that window. You can change it down, change it up. So up being it'll notify you on every single change you ever make at all, or you can start lowering that down, right? Don't notify me when I'm making changes to the Windows settings. Only when applications do it, or don't ever notify me. I don't care. Whatever. Just do whatever. Right? And the default is notify me when me or apps make changes to Windows settings. If you're going to scale it down to this. And then if you really don't care, I don't recommend that you don't care. You can bring it all the way down. If you're super paranoid, you can bring it all the way up. Anytime anything changes ever, it'll tell you. But yeah, middle of the road is pretty good. Leave it alone most of the time. And then update and security, right? I mean, there's not really a whole lot to talk about right here other than just do them. Make sure they are done. Avoid the whole gnashing of teeth when your Windows computer just ups and reboots on you because you didn't do your updates for 2.5 months, right? It will eventually do it. Just run them yourself, right? Like after you have saved that Word doc and you're about to go to bed, just run the updates. And then when you get up in the morning, reboot it. Have a fresh rebooted machine. Yay! Don't let it be during a time when you're going to end up in a situation where, yeah, bad things are going to happen, right? So this is what it looks like. You just type in update into the start menu and you'll find it. Update and check for updates. And it'll tell me that I need to do updates. Oh, yeah, look at this. I'm already queued up for one of those. It's going to do it on me. So, yeah, I better make sure I save all my stuff. And then check for updates if there are no updates, or run your updates if there are. Windows 7 and Windows 8 look like this. Well, Windows 8 also has the window that looks like that. They were kind of in limbo where you had both. But Windows 7 looks like this. If you are unlucky enough to run into a machine that has this, then, may God have mercy on your soul. But run your updates, right? It's the best thing you can do for an older machine like that. Set them to automatically run, too. That'd be fantastic. All right. So, because I'm going to put this on a video, I'm just going to keep going. I know we're out of time. So if anybody that's connected up right now needs to go, you can go ahead and go. The video will be available to you. So I'm just going to keep going. This will make this a whole lot easier than going on a two-part, making y'all wait till Thursday for this. So anyhow, BitLocker. So if you want to encrypt your entire drive, BitLocker is the way that you do it. Mac does it by default. Linux gives you the option on install, and Windows makes you do it after the fact. Doesn't matter so long as you know how to do it. BitLocker is the way that you do it. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to open up a file explorer, go to this PC, right click, turn on BitLocker. It is that easy. Now it doesn't have TPM. This is typically fine. Interesting. It used to let me go in. Interesting. Oops. Well, we may not do BitLocker, but we can encrypt specific files. How funny is that? Huh. Well, I say that. I might have to come back on this one anyway. And it may be... Let me try one more thing. Ah, where did it go? Oh, there it is. Let's see if I can do it on this one. Okay, that's it. It's because I needed a secondary drive. So y'all should have that secondary drive from before. So make sure to do BitLocker on that drive. So to do your system drive, so what it was talking about, saying that you needed a TPM module. TPM is basically a chip that's in your computer that will store the keys for BitLocker. So if someone steals your hard drive and plugs it into another computer, they're obviously not going to have that key. They have to steal your entire computer. Now, the TPM module basically has static keys that will be used anytime BitLocker is used, and BitLocker will always look to that TPM module for those keys. If you're doing additional drives, then you will need to set a password or use a smart card. So smart card can just be a USB drive as well, or use something like a YubiKey, which is basically a key that's like TPM. It's a key that contains keys. It's a USB key, well, a USB drive that contains encryption keys that BitLocker will use to encrypt and decrypt stuff. So anyway, on your secondary drive, turn on BitLocker, use a password, set your password. This will be the password to unlock your key if you ever need it. And then here you go, save to a USB flash drive, or you can just save it to a file. You probably don't want to keep this file on your machine for very long. to be honest, you probably just want to, whatever USB key that you're putting it on, you probably want to do that immediately. Don't save it to your desktop and then move it on to your USB key. Save it to the USB flash drive directly. That way, there is no record of it. We were talking about files getting scrubbed off your drive, right? They never actually get scrubbed off your drive unless you go and do DBAN or something like that. So if you have that key on your drive, then it will be there. And someone might be able to recover that key and then unlock all your stuff. So bad news bears, use a USB flash drive and then use that flash drive only for that. Little 4 gig flash drives are basically free. So like a whole $2. You can buy like a 10-pack for like $10. So yeah, definitely do that. Anyway, once you do that, it will lock the drive and will require that key every single time that you try to get into that drive. So BitLocker is fairly simple to do as long as you're not trying to do the system drive. Now, some advanced attributes. We're looking at compression. You can compress the entire drive. So if you are really hurting for space, and I mean, if you're hurting for space enough that you're considering compressing your entire drive, just get a bigger drive. You're going to run into the same problem here in about 10 days anyway. So just get a bigger drive. And I saw Acronis in there a little while ago. Use Acronis to just move from this hard drive to the new hard drive and then, install all your stuff. And or you don't even have to install all your stuff. Expand your drive, make it bigger, all that kind of fun stuff, right? There's a way to deal with that. Use disk cleanup to get rid of some extra files, especially files that might be like updates that you did like 10 times ago. It'll still have some of those files. But you can compress the entire disk, or let's go in here. Let's see, do I have any files? No. Well, let's pretend I had documents somewhere, right? You can go into the documents folder, or any folder, really. And then you can compress the documents folder. So you can do a disk, or you can do a specific directory, right? And you do the same thing with encryption. So Windows 10 may or may not do it, but if you had, let me just create some files real quick. What? All right, that's fine. Can I do that? Oh, wow. Nobody does bitmap anymore. Where's Paint? Just need Paint. Regular Paint. Okay, we'll save that. Oops. Wrong button. We'll do that again. All right, so I mean, these files are pretty big, right? So if we are compressing it, we would go to that file. Oops. Advanced, compress that. Hit apply. Yeah, they got rid of the blue text. Compression used to actually turn the text blue. Now it's got this little arrow thing on it. Let me see if I can make these icons bigger so you can see them. Yeah, this little arrow right here. Yeah. And then as far as encryption goes, you'll do the same thing. Oop, I don't know why I keep security. It messes with me. Hit OK. Apply that. Now here's the thing. This is a separate key. You will want. It's going to store the key. There it goes. And it's going to tell you to back it up, right? Back up now. Here's how you export it. You want to put that directly onto a USB drive. You want to give it a password as well. You probably don't want triple DES. Probably want AES 256. Give it a file name. My cool key. And then it's going to put it on my documents. But if you go back, you can browse and put it into a flash drive. So you can export that key, right? And now it's there. So it's got a lock if it's encrypted. It's got these little arrows, I guess, indicating compression. I mean, it's what it indicates. It doesn't look like it does. So, anyhow, and then there's your key. So if you ever take this file and move it somewhere else and try to open it up, it's going to ask for this key. All right, so that is how you compress and encrypt. Windows 10 Action Center, I mean, it's just basically a notification center. It'll tell you things, right? That's all it is. There's a lot of buttons down here that you can use to turn on and off things, right? Night light's kind of cool. It makes everything like kind of reddish, adds a yellowish tint to everything to be nice on your eyes when it's dark in your room and late at night or whatever. Turn on and off network things, get to the settings, turn on your VPN. So there's a lot of things that that little window will do. But this is more, anytime Windows needs to tell you something, it's going to show up right there. So in Windows 7 and 8, they had an Action Center as well, and it would give you the same basic information, but it would also give you a bunch of links to a bunch of different things, right? So Smart Screen, User Account Control Settings, Action Center here, and then see any messages that were before. This will also give you kind of an easy way to get to the backup so you can do your recovery, and not that troubleshooter worked anyway, but you could access the troubleshooter from here. Now we're at the end. Yeah, AES is pretty difficult to understand, but if you just want a bird's eye view of it, AES basically does primes. They're uncalculable primes, right? Like we're talking like tens or hundreds of digits, right? And then that number is a prime. And then they find another prime that is about the same size, and they multiply those together, and then you get the key. The reason that makes a key is because you can't figure out which primes made that number going backwards. So I have one prime, you have the other prime, and together we make our key. So it becomes pretty crazy. So what they'll basically do is they'll multiply their message by their key, and then I'll be able to reverse it with mine. So yeah. That's a bird's eye level view. That is taking way too much of the detail out of what actually happens. But I've got a couple of videos. If you're curious about AES, we'll talk about it in the security class. But if you're curious about AES, I've got a really cool video that uses paints that show you how all of this kind of encryption craziness works. It's really fascinating. Cryptography is crazy cool. But I mean, to be honest with you, you got to be on like a mathematician's track to really understand what's going on. So we get some simplifications. All right. So more so than Norton or McAfee or Windows Defender or anything else, one of the best things that you can do for yourself as far as protection is to install an ad blocker in your browser. The downside to Chrome and all Chromium-based browsers is that here pretty soon you're not going to be able to install ad blockers, right? I mean, Google makes the browser, and Google is primarily an ad company. So, yeah, why would they want you blocking ads? So anyway, I don't think it's specifically for ads, but it's kind of getting caught in the crossfire. They are removing the ability of add-ons. They're removing their ability to manipulate data before they are processed by the browser. So you will get the ads, and they will only be able to be removed after the fact, after you've downloaded them, after you've run the code. But the reason that uBlock Origin is so fascinating and so helpful is that it will block the ad before you ever run the code, which means that if the ad was malicious, then you never actually know it, because you never downloaded the code. And it turns out that a lot of the infections are coming from malicious ads that you get on the side of your browser. Going to Facebook, going to different websites or whatever, you click on that ad for one reason or another, and it turns out that ad may have been malicious. So uBlock Origin is pretty fantastic. The other thing that I would say, if you are not really on the paranoid side, but if you're more on the squeaky clean side, you'll want this guy. Probably one of the best scanners for malware out there right now. Ignore all of the opportunities to upgrade. If you are manually scanning once every couple of weeks or once every month or something like that, you never really need to buy anything. This is if you want, always on protection. It's always scanning. It's always looking. It's always blah, blah, blah. I feel like Malwarebytes kind of going the way of all the other antivirus programs and just getting really, really bloated, having a million things to do. No, the free one gives you everything that you need to keep yourself protected. It will not tell you in real time whether or not you are being threatened or whatever, but just run it once every couple of weeks. Windows Defender and Malwarebytes together tend to make a really good team. And uBlock Origin helps prevent anything from getting on your machine from a browser standpoint in the first place. I have not heard of Cylance. What is that? Same thing? Artificial intelligence. See, they get you with the buzzwords, throwing out the artificial intelligence, machine learning. Yeah. So turns out a lot of different guys do this. Kind of taking a look at it now. But like Palo Alto, Sophos, there are a couple others as well. Fortinet, I think they all have their version of this, and it's basically where they will do that heuristic stuff. What I was telling you about with the Windows Defender and how they upload specimens, and then Microsoft will look at them or whatever. That's what this AI stuff actually is. Buzzwords. But I mean, I don't know. Like, how does it stack up against all the others, and is it just a big pile of bloatware? That's really where I'm at. Because more often than not, people are complaining about software, their antivirus, more than they're complaining about a slow computer, because the malware thing is just what's really slowing their computer down, because it's like scanning hours and hours and hours a day or something like that. So you got to be careful with that stuff. But if it works, it works. I won't say no. Okay. Yeah, it's really hard to, for years and years, people have paid for antivirus, and it's really hard to convince people that, you don't have to pay for it anymore. But, since it's not a line item anymore, they feel like they're not protected. So, yeah, and you can turn that on. The application thing that we saw in Windows Defender can do that as well. Yep. It just comes at it at another way. Instead of having a whitelist, they have a blacklist. But you can turn that around. You can actually turn it into a whitelist if you like to. It just takes a little bit of work. But the cool thing about that is you can programmatically do it through PowerShell. And I bet you money you can't do that with Cylance. So there are a million good reasons to use Windows Defender and not some third-party thing. But that's not saying that Cylance is bad or not as good or anything like that. I've not used it, so I can't say. But Windows Defender is dang good, man. Definitely worth a shot, especially when you can control it programmatically, right? So uBlock Origin, Malwarebytes, Windows Defender, or something else that you trust that doesn't totally slow down your computer. That makes a good trifecta of all of this. So those three things will keep you pretty safe on the internet. Don't go looking for trouble, because all of that stuff will not prevent you from hurting yourself if you're trying to go do it on purpose. But it will do a pretty good job of making sure that you stay on the ledge, If you're curious about some of these things, right, like CryptoLocker was probably one of the biggest, baddest ransomwares out there. WannaCry was a close second. You can go read about those, how bad they were, who they took down. I mean, like a handful of hospitals in the UK took them down, man. How to actually defend against worms. Some attacks called like Meltdown Inspector. These are firmware attacks, right, to Intel and AMD processors. You cannot fix these. Heartbleed was another good one. Dirty Cow was another good one on the Linux side. But then you have like Eternal Blue that I don't even have here. So yeah, go look up Eternal Blue. That one is fantastic. But anyway, the lab for you guys is not really a lab. It's kind of a lab. You still have to do labby things. You just don't give me screenshots this time. It's a health and security project. Basically what this is a bunch of different questions that ask you to tell me how to do some specific things, right? Beatrice wants to open up FTP to her colleagues. Give her a step-by-step guide to open up port 20 and 21 over TCP, right? Lucky for you, I did that for you. So go back in the video and you can see how you do that. Configure UAC. How do you do that? Windows Update. How do you schedule that? Microsoft Security Essentials. How do you figure that? And Security Essentials is Defender. You know what? I'll just go ahead and edit that. Windows Defender. There we go. And that way there's no question about how all this works. Let me see, what else is this? Create a new account. Encrypt a folder on his desktop. Compress a hard drive. And run a backup. So, all of those things. What I'm looking for is, how do you do it? Remember, Beatrice doesn't know how to do this. She has no clue. You can't just tell her, well, just open up port 20 and 21 on your firewall. Like, you can't get by with that. Beatrice doesn't know what the firewall is. But, you are 1,000 miles apart and Beatrice needs help now. So what you want to do is write her an email, essentially. I don't want the email. I don't want the hey Beatrice or whatever. I just need Beatrice do this. Like step 1, step 2, step 3. Click on this. Type this in. On this window, you're going to see this. Do this. Click here. Click next. Click finish. And then you're good. So give me the step-by-step instructions on how to do these particular things. And the reason I say that it's a lab but it's not a lab is to get those instructions, you're going to have to actually run through that stuff yourself. So, you have to go click on this, click on that, click on whatever. But as you're doing that, write those steps down. Click on this, click on that. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? That's all I need. Now, at the bottom of this, you're going to have a save. Make sure you save periodically. If for some reason you're on the page and you write a bunch of stuff and then like Chrome crashes or something like that, then it's all gone. So make sure you save periodically. Do not finish, but save it periodically. All right. So that'll do it for this week. Run through all that stuff. It will take some time, so do not expect this to be short. This is why I don't have a lab for you guys. I don't have a lab and a quiz separately. This is just this. And I don't need to know if you know what a firewall is because you're obviously going to be opening it up so I can see that you know what a firewall is, right? So no need for a quiz, no need for a separate lab, just do this. It is time consuming, so be aware. The other thing, I think, no, go back further, is that I'm going to give you guys a few extra days for this. So typically it would have been due on the 5th. But I'm giving you guys to the 12th. Do not wait until the 12th. This is a long lab. You have to do it. Do a little bit of it every single day. If you do one of those questions every single day, you'll have it done on the 6th or the 7th or something like that, with plenty of time to spare. And it probably only takes about 15 minutes to do each one, if that. Right? The compression and encryption one are almost identical. You copy and paste most of that. All right. But that's it. That's all I got for you. I'm going to stop this here.